So hello again. Today is the 9th of August 2018 and I'm here in the Radio Guidance studio with Ginny John Lash, so-called self-proclaimed Gnostic teacher, and we're here with our second talk on the subject of flat earth. Now I want to entitle this talk significantly, The Opportunity of the Flat Earth Debate. I want to make it clear that we both agree that there is an opportunity of things to be learned in this debate. But unfortunately, so far as I can tell, the debate between the two sides of the argument has not taken a form that has really allowed us to learn something we don't already know, or has allowed us to reach a conclusion that we haven't already made. And secondly, the subtopic or related topic of this talk, second talk in the series, will be how the flat earth movement operates as a psyop. Now, to begin this talk, I'd like to read a very short quote, which is just one sentence long. And this is from a book called Yogananda, The Tantric View of Life. It was written by Herbert Gunther, and it was published in Benares, India, in 1969. And the statement is, quote, "Illusion does not mean the illusion of perception, but the false conclusion we base upon perception," end quote. So I think that that's a remarkable statement that might sum up what I would like to see achieved in this debate, if there were to be a real debate, an honest, open, fair, civil, polite, intelligent debate to the mutual benefit of the parties. If that were to happen, then I would expect to see two results of that debate. One is that we would learn what is illusory in our perception and what is correct in our perception. Therefore, we would correct our perceptions of the world around us, the earthly habitat. And secondly, that we would divest ourselves together, both flat earthers and spherical earthers would have the opportunity to divest themselves, liberate themselves, I might say, from false conclusions based on what they perceive. So it's an epistemological exercise in liberation of the human mind. Ideally, at the best, that's what it could be. But as I said, unfortunately, it's not playing out that way so far.
Well, as far as I can see, a lot of the flat earthers' debate is built on, trust what you see. It's built on perception. Trust what your eyes tell you. Can you see a curvature of the earth? No. So trust on what you perceive. So perception is a really key point in the debate.
Absolutely.
If one was allowed to debate
openly and fairly.
Let's make this clear now. John, you are not here to convince a flat earther that they are wrong.
Certainly not.
You're not here to convince the spherical tards, the globe tards as they're known, that they're right.
Not at all. As a matter of fact, when we get to the third talk, you might find that I have some surprising things to say that haven't been said before in the context of this debate. But for right now, let me emphasize that we're not here to persuade anyone. One of the problems with this debate is that it triggers judgments about what the different sides are saying or assuming. For instance, if you go back and you listen to part one of our talk, you might assume that actually I'm arguing for the validity of the spherical Earth model. But I'm really not. I'm just pointing out that when you look at the historical record of the views that have been held about the shape of the Earth, you find a certain amount of evidence and a certain kind of evidence supporting the view that it's spherical. And you also find other evidence supporting the view that it's flat. And it so happens, just as a matter of fact, that the first type of evidence is much more preponderant. I don't mean to draw from that the conclusion that it's necessarily true. Not at all. It's like, this is not a democratic argument. It's not decided by the majority. But it is a fact of history, which I would ask flat earthers to take on board and be honest about if we're going to enter into this debate. It doesn't prove that the earth is round just because that's the view that was dominantly held. But I consider it important in entering the debate to point out the simple fact, which is the subject of the book by Jeffrey Burton Russell, Inventing the Flat Earth, the simple fact that sphericity was the dominant view. And so if flat earthers claim that historically sphericity was not the dominant view, that is simply not true. That does simply not stand up to scrutiny. It does not match the evidence. That's all. But it's not to persuade anyone one way or the other, just to look at the evidence.
Do you care if the earth is flat or spherical?
I don't really care one way or the other. I just, whatever it is, I love it the way it is. I love her shape, whatever her shape is. And I have my own perceptions and discoveries about the shape of the earth to offer in the third talk. So that's where we're coming from, and I realize that it may not sound that way. It may sound like we're lying right now. We actually have accepted that the earth is spherical and can only be, but we're pretending to be open-minded about it. Well, I really don't give a ... I don't care, and neither do you.
No.
All right. Shall we proceed?
Yes.
We're going to consider here the question of the opportunity posed by the Flat Earth debate. And in the context of that question, we're going to consider if it might be a psyop. And we're going to kind of examine that psyop, look at it from different sides. And we're also going to talk about a couple of principal exponents of Flat Earth to comment on their exposition, okay? So this is how we're going to proceed. As we move into it, I want to make it clear that it's both and. It's not one thing or the other. The Flat Earth controversy is a great opportunity to learn some things we don't know yet, to divest our minds of some of the false and deceitful aspects of our view of the world. But it's also an opportunity to look at a psyop. And I'm going to be upfront and honest about that, upfront and in your face, and tell you that we do both consider it to be a psyop.
Within a psyop.
Yeah, it's a psyop within a psyop, but not just that. The psyop is an opportunity to learn something as well. So I'd like to just give you the background of how I think the psyop is set up. I believe, on the basis of historical evidence, that there were cases in the past when certain teachers or authorities, such as the church father Lactantius, or such as the Greek writer and traveler known as Cosmos Indicopleustes, maintained that the earth was of a flat topography and that it was disc-shaped in some manner. I assume that the disc shape is implied in the flatness. It's flat, but it's a flat plate. It's a disc. So I hold that the historical evidence shows that this view was held in the past, but it was not the dominant view. And Christopher Columbus, for instance, did not believe, nor did any of the people who supported him believe, that he was at risk of sailing off the edge of the world, right? I also maintain that the germinal form of the present Flat Earth movement came from a fictional work. And I don't know if you have seen anyone else who pointed this out.
Irving Washington.
About Washington Irving.
Washington Irving.
Right. I haven't come across that anywhere else. Have you?
No.
It's Jeffrey Burton Russell, by the way, who points that out in his book. So I believe that the current view of the flat earth, let's not go back to medieval times or ancient times, or prehistoric times, or Babylonian or Egyptian cosmology. Let's just say the current debate began around 1828 with Washington Irving's fictionalization of the story of Christopher Columbus. And that fiction, as often happens, was almost like a predictive programming. You know how we see this today happening?
Like George
often?
Orwell's 1984.
Exactly. Or like the predictive programming of the Simpsons cartoons. People see in the Simpsons episodes a predictive programming coming out of a fictional mode that eventually came to be true. So I see that as the seminal point of a movement that then began to be defined by other people. Now, Ginny, in your account of that in the first talk, you outlined some of the people who built up the flat earth cosmology in the 19th century and then bringing it to the 20th century when the movement was founded, right? So I'm regarding it, this is just my view, we're having an open debate here. I'm putting my cards on the table. I'm regarding the movement as recent and as having developed along these lines. Now, there's the question of why that movement, which has existed for about 150 years, right, would present itself in a great revival. Let's say I have seen a certain revival of the flat earth cosmology, over the last 5 or 6 years maybe? And I think most people who follow the internet and use it as a tool of study would agree with that suddenly they're starting to appear on the internet for whatever reason, spontaneously or by orchestration, massive amount of clips of people arguing for flat earth. So that raises in my mind the question, well, what is the cause of the recent revival of flat earth, and why is it being pushed? If it is being pushed, who is pushing it, and why are they doing so? So this is how I come to my stance on regarding flat earth as a psyop. I think it's a psyop that was implemented a few years back by particular parties for a very particular reason.
Yep.
Make sense?
Yep.
So we've talked about this a lot. What is a reason that, and when you ask the question, well, what is the reason behind this psyop? A good way to develop that question is to look at what are the results of this psyop? And what are the results of the psyop?
The results of the psyop are that it splits communities. It particularly splits the community of white nationalists who are awake to the JQ. It prevents people from having their probative faculty in fully functioning order.
That's right. Probative faculty refers to the ability of an individual to use their mind to gather evidence, to sort through the evidence, to select which evidence is valid and reliable, and reject which may be planted or false evidence, and then on the basis of the evidence to put together a narrative, which is a proof process, and by that proof process to arrive at a conclusion. It's exactly what happens in a court case when someone comes in accused of a murder and the prosecution has to build a case. That's using the probative faculty, meaning probity or proving and testing. So your observation is that the very presentation of this flat earth paradigm stuns or stunts the probative faculty in a way.
Yes.
Right.
But it's insidious because the that's not what people think when they're starting to look at the flat Earth and, oh yeah, well, water's always level. How can we be on a globe if water's always level? You know, the globe is a huge percentage of water. So they're actually conning themselves that they're using their probative faculty by looking at the arguments for flat Earth.
That's one way to put it. I think that really fits the case. My critical observation, which is not to discount them and dismiss them as complete idiots, but my critical observation of the behavior and reasoning of flat earthers is that they blow their own case on the first move. They just blow their own case by the way they handle the evidence. This is very unfortunate for them, and it causes an explosion that splits people up and disintegrates the coherence and the unity of the so-called truth movement. Would you agree? Yeah,
and our good friend, well, your good friend, Robert Oakley, has got a lovely little video on his YouTube channel. We'll try and put a link. We'll try and remember to put the link in the show more part of this upload. And that's what he says, you know, this is just, it's you people, you're just, you know, you're buying into a divisive mechanism to divide the truth movement.
That's right. So we're saying here, we're claiming, Ginny and I, that if this is indeed a psyop, then one of the principal purposes of it was to divide and split up and fragment what I call the truth core. That group of people who have been using the internet since, say, 9/11, particularly, 17 years now, have been intensively working together, using the internet to explore things, to expose deceit. We're working together as the truth core, and this subject comes up and it just fragments the whole movement and undermines the coherence of the movement.
And rightly so in a lot of cases of theories that are put forward by the flat Earth movement, you know, for example, the moon landings.
Yes.
We learnt a few days ago something that we didn't know about the moon landing.
Right, there appears to be a new piece of intel floating out of cyberspace about the moon landing. Again, the connection, the overlap between the moon landing hoax idea and flat Earth gets to be very, very, very complicated. In fact, I was, I would say attacked or confronted or challenged, whatever you want to put it, by several comments on the first talk. Oh, he must believe that we actually went to the moon. Why would you assume that I believe that? Well, if you're a flat earther, in your mind, somehow the notion of the hoax of the moon landing is associated with the proof that the earth is flat and that the moon is really not even there to go to in the sense that NASA claims it is, right? So, point I want to make, I'd like to return just for a moment, because this is floating in the back of my mind, to the analogy of a courtroom. Say someone has been accused of murder. So the murderer is sitting in the dock, and there is the prosecution, and there is the defense. What happens in a court case is like what happens when a sane human animal or a team of human animals together exercise their probative faculty, their snoopy.
Well, it's what should happen in a court case.
It's what really should happen, according to the ideal case, okay? Using your snoopy, to take a reference from the Mandela Effect Decoded. So, what happens in a court case is that the prosecution, who holds that the accused is guilty, presents a body of evidence and develops a proof from that. On the other hand, the defense presents another body of evidence, the alibi, a lack of real motive, possibility that it's a frame, builds a proof process out of that, and they both stand there, and then you look at them and you make a determination from the two of them. Unfortunately, this is not what's happening in the flat earth debate. What you have happening is people saying on both sides, but mostly the flat earthers, screaming, you can't prove it, you can't prove it, you can't prove it. Well, that's absolutely untrue. There is a body of proof showing that the earth is spherical. There is a body of proof showing that the earth is flat. Surely we can put those two bodies of proof side by side and evaluate them and assess them and reach some transcendent conclusion. But we haven't got there yet, unfortunately. So this constant assault, you can't prove the earth is round, you can't prove this, you can't, it's not about what can or cannot be proven. It's about the body of proof that supports each view and developing it openly and then looking at it as a whole. I dearly wish that we could do that, but I think we're a long way from doing that because some people get so emotionally involved in this issue. And I think the effectiveness of the PSYOP, you would say it's a very devastating PSYOP.
Yes.
The effectiveness of the PSYOP is that it reaches something in the human animal which is extremely dangerous. Something that we were warned about 70 or 80 years ago by Wilhelm Reich. And he called it the emotional plague. You see it in SJWs. You see it in the commies, in the Bolsheviks today on the left. It's irrationality. And there is a great deal of irrationality coming from the side of the flat earthers. And I think it would be fair to say that they ruin their own case by their irrational, emotional hysteria.
Well, they come across as SJWs.
Yeah, in that same nasty attitude. You checked out an interview, right? Someone challenged me to go debate someone.
Yeah, Nathan Oakley. Nathan Oakley's a man from Birmingham in England. So I had a fish around Nathan Oakley, and he is unreasonable, he's irrational, he's aggressive, frontally and passively aggressive. He shuts people down. I listened to him having. There were 4 flat earthers, and there was one man, Mick West,
West.
He calls himself Mick West.
Yeah.
Who was there trying to debate with them. Mick West kept his cool for the entire 50 whatever minutes it was, and the other people did as well. But Nathan Oakley, who this person on your channel challenged you to debate. It would be like putting Miley Cyrus and Socrates in a boxing ring. Nathan Oakley, he just, he started calling Mick names. He was calling him stupid. Well, you're clearly retarded. Oh, for goodness sake, man. It was just, I was just sat there with my mouth wide open, listening to this person, making a complete fool out of himself. And the spherical man, Mick West, never jumped to the bait once, never. He just completely kept his cool. He was impressive, actually. And it was just like a torrent of SJW shit.
And abuse.
Abuse, yeah.
I have to concur. Again, it appears like I'm taking the sides of flat earthers, taking the sides of the spherical paradigm, and I am taking the side of the spherical paradigm, not to say that that is the only and exclusive truth, but to say that those who argue for it are, in my opinion, far more credible and civil and reasonable in their arguments. I mean, when I started to investigate this, and this still happens, I get really ill.
I can't wait for these series of talks to be over. I hate this subject.
This subject
makes me feel ill too.
Makes me nauseous.
Yeah.
I started out when I was going to write the book, and then I put the team on it. You put our team on it. I started out to look through the many, many hundreds of clips that came up to find out what a flat earther really thinks, so that I could not fall into the trap of constructing a straw man argument about what the flat earth view is. It's extremely difficult to find out what flat earthers think. You have to listen to so much irrational rambling and attacking and ranting that it actually has the effect of making me somewhat nauseous. And this again is very, very unfortunate, but bear in mind that if it is a psyop, and if the intention of the psyop is to create cognitive dissonance at a profound level, then it's working. It's working, I must say. So let's discuss a little more what might be the purpose of this psyop and how the psyop operates. Now, one of the things that you mentioned just a few minutes ago, and I'll repeat it because I think it's a cogent observation. This is a very peculiar, twisty psyop because it's a psyop that pretends to enlighten you about a psyop.
Yeah.
Right? So
the psyop is that we've been lied to historically, miseducated in schools, lied to about the moon landings, and that the people who are lying to us are the Jesuits.
Well, that's one claim. We'll get to who in a moment, okay? But let's outline what our concept of the psyop is here so we get it across very clearly to the listeners. As far as I can tell, those in the Flat Earth movement claim that there's a massive program of deceit happening, which can be defined as a psyop, because a psyop is a program of deceit. And the purpose of the Flat Earth movement is to reveal that deceit to you and free you from being caught in that deceit. But my observation is that the claim of the movement to free you from a deceit is actually trapping you in a deceit.
Yeah.
So it's a psyop that pretends to reveal a psyop. And it has that duplicitous structure, which makes it very, very dangerous and very difficult to work through. Okay? So let's talk about, again, who is doing this, who might undertake such a psyop, and why. What is the purpose? What is the ultimate objective of it? Well, you said one thing is, it has certainly fragmented the truth movement in a very unfortunate way. And you pointed out that it seems particularly to be Christian nationalists, I would add, not just white nationalists, but Christian nationalists, such as we're not, are really into Flat Earth. And then there are us pagan, Nazi Satanist white nationalists, right, like us, who suddenly we're not on the same page with them about the JQ or anything important because they disregard us because we don't buy Flat Earth. This is extremely unfortunate.
It's divide and conquer.
But specifically, divide and conquer that faction of the truth community which has come to a realization of the imperative nature of the JQ.
Yeah.
And even one of the main spokespeople for Flat Earth has stated his views on the JQ very strongly.
Yeah, Eric Debate. I know somebody put in the comments section that he's not really revered in the Flat Earth community, but I think he's a very important character in the Flat Earth community because he has been writing about subjects such as the Holocaust since 2011. So he comes from a JQ perspective.
Right. That's right.
He advocates David Irving, David Duke, Judy Wood, Zion Crime Factory, and then he advocates...
Zion Crime Factory?
Yeah, and then he advocates other people who are dubious.
So here's a man, a voice on the internet, who appears as a main actor in the Flat Earth debate, and he's holding these views, which we also hold.
Yeah,
right?
And I think the thing about him is that he's one of the few flat earthers who does have a rationale approach to what he's saying. He's a yoga teacher in Thailand. And so he comes from a very calm and centered point of view.
He's very convincing, very suave.
He is very convincing.
He would be. We speculated at first when we encountered him, if he had not been like a chosen one.
Yeah.
There's some, if you look into his background, that he had been chosen as the frontman / messiah of the Flat Earth movement because he's very slick and very suave. He's very confident about what he says. And also, of paramount importance to me, is that he embeds his view of Flat Earth, his advocacy, in a model of consciousness,
Yeah.
which I'm going to do in part 3.
Yeah.
But I don't use his model of consciousness. He uses the model of Raja Yoga, I believe. Right.
And this is the MO of the powers that shouldn't be in charge. They're picking young men, such as Eric Dubay, Justin Trudeau, the Austrian Prime Minister,
Right.
Russell Brand.
That's right.
And they're all these kind of, good-looking.
Charismatic, suave. We've seen this type before.
Yeah.
Right. Who position themselves on certain profoundly important controversial issues like the Holocaust and the nature of the JQ is the influence of Jews in the non-Jewish world something good or something malignant. Big, big questions. They position themselves on these questions. They gain the confidence of the people who have looked at those questions, and then, pow, they come in with Flat Earth, which, in the eyes of many people, immediately delegitimizes the other views they hold.
Yeah.
So I think the PSYOP is definitely calculated in that way.
Well, it's back to the tinfoil hat wearer, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I've seen that a lot on the internet, that people who believe in the flat earth are called tinfoil hat wearers. So, yes, it delegitimizes anything else that they are talking about, such as Zionist crimes,
Right.
the Holocaust lie.
That's right. So we're going to doubt the veracity of the other views held by this person if we don't go along with the flat earth paradigm.
So it's damaging. It's really, really damaging.
Extremely damaging.
Very damaging. And that is their modus operandi, divide and conquer.
And unfortunately, at this stage of the crisis in humanity's in the divine experiment on earth, as I call it, we really need to pull together on these points, these essential points of truth. And anything that puts us at odds with each other or makes us doubt each other's sanity and each other's reasoning abilities is just helping the enemy and helping the psychopaths who would like to run this planet into ruin. So the flat earth PSYOP, to the extent that it is one, definitely serves that objective.
Yeah, it's the equivalent of flat earthers versus globe earthers and Christians versus Islam. It's exactly the same thing.
Right.
And if all of those four components could all join together and unite, regardless of what their religious beliefs or whatever shape they think the earth is, if those four parties alone could join as one against the enemies of life, then we'd be in a much better place.
There's a lot at stake here. Now, what you just said triggered a couple of points in my mind that I don't want to let slide by. One is concerning Islam, and then the other is concerning another purpose or aim of the PSYOP. So I said at the beginning, when we were discussing this, back at the beginning of, 2017, I have the opinion, I don't know what the Quran says or the Hadith or any of that.
It's 2016.
2016. I have the sense, I've got a suspicion, my Snoopy tells me, Snoopy dog, that the prominent view, the prominent paradigm in Islam is probably flat earth. I don't know if there's any imam or any ayatollah who has came out and made that statement. Islam is not a religion, it's a political movement disguised as a religion. One of the characteristics of Islam is that they just lay down the law. There's no debate in Islam. You know, the first line of the Quran is, this book is not to be debated or not to be questioned. So there are 1.6 million, presumably, 1.6 billion Muslims, some of whom are Arabs, some of whom are Asian, of Mongols. You know, there's many Muslims in Russia, some of them in Indonesia, okay? The ones in Indonesia are not, you know, Arabs. And just imagine if in one sweeping move an Ayatollah or Imam came out and made an announcement that flat earth is the official dogma of Islam. Suddenly you would have 1/4, 1/5 of the world population adhering to flat earth. That would be, in some people's minds, a major operation of mind control. And I'm surprised that that hasn't happened yet, actually. I'm pretty sure that that might happen. I've questioned why that hasn't happened yet, and my mind keeps going back to the topic of the one world religion. Now, some of you may know that the concept of the New World Order, or Jew World Order, which has been exposed by diligent people through the internet, kind of runs in parallel with a one world religion concept. And I remember hearing for more than 15 years now that the plan of the globalists and those who are building a one world system of control includes a one world religion that everyone can adhere to, right? And some people go back to Theosophy, some people go back to Blavatsky for the origins of that, the Lucas Trust Fund, Blavatsky, Alice Bailey. Some people go back to Baha'i, which came out in the 19th century and was supposedly a program for the unity of all religions. So you have interfaith, you have the unity of all religions, and there's been an idea proposed by many people that we are being pushed into that agenda. But that agenda really hasn't materialized yet. In fact, you don't hear much about it anymore. You know, it's less discussed than it was 5 or 10 years ago. So I'm thinking, suppose that there is a plan, a conspiratorial plan, to bring people toward this one world religion, which would of course exclude Gnosticism or Gnosis and Sophianic animism. And that plan is faltering. Maybe the flat earth paradigm has been brought in to buck up that plan, and that they are going to still continue to pursue that plan, in which case they would announce that 1.6 billion Muslims believe in flat earth, and so you better believe in it too, because if you don't, you're going to be in trouble with the Muslims, right? So I've wondered about that. That's just kind of speculation. What do you have any comment on that?
Well, the one world religion is going to be the no-hide laws, so...
There you go.
I haven't looked at what the no-hide laws say about the shape of the earth.
Right. However, it is pretty clear that the flat earth paradigm has an incrustation around it. I would say that it comes with an incrustation. And that incrustation is technically called Christian topography. Now, if you go on Wikipedia and you look up this person, Cosmos Indicopleustes.
Great name.
Right, which really means the Indian voyager. And he was actually a Greek who lived around 550 AD, and he traveled the seas, and he was one of the main proponents during the Middle Ages of flat earth.
Why did he hit the edge of the earth then?
Right. He didn't, apparently, I haven't read his works, maybe he records coming to the edge of the earth, but he...
The selfie at the edge of the... on the...
Yes, that's
the
right.
edge of the disc.
Yeah, I don't know, I haven't seen that selfie yet. Much to his credit, showing his meticulous scholarship, Jeffrey Burton Russell points out that the prominent, what are known today as the prominent voices of flat earth in the Middle Ages, were Cosmos Indicopleustes and Lactantius, who was a church father who died around the time that Hypatia was murdered. And he points out something that only an historian can know, only an historian who's looked closely into the facts. And you may not believe him. Maybe you think Jeffrey Burton Russell is just full of shit. Well, that's your opinion. He points out that even though these two argued strongly against sphericity, they had very little influence in the time they lived, and they had very little influence through the Middle Ages. But they did have this viewpoint, which is called Christian topography, which is described like this in Wikipedia. A major feature of his topographia is Cosmos' worldview that the world is flat and that the heavens form the shape of a box with a curved lid. He was scornful of Ptolemy and others who held that the world was spherical. Cosmos aimed to prove that pre-Christian geographers had been wrong in asserting that the earth was spherical and that it was in fact modeled on the tabernacle in the Old Testament, the house of worship described to Moses by God during the Jewish exodus from Egypt.
Which is a lie.
Okay, just stop right there. That's what's called Christian topography. It means that the topography or the science or model of the shape of the earth is based in Christian fundamentalism. Well, lo and behold, I don't think I would be resorting to a straw man argument if I said that most people I've ever heard in the flat earth movement reassert Christian fundamentalism. So the flat earth movement is a way to push biblical theology, the God the Father cosmology, the Jewish Semitic con of Christian religion, because Christianity is just the Jewish con. So Judeo-Christian fundamentalism is embedded in the movement and may be one of the reasons for pushing the movement. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, I mean, even Eric Dubai, even though he's coming from an esoteric viewpoint, even he talks about Jesus and God. Right.
You talk about Jesus as a Vedic master?
Yeah, pretty much.
Right. That's an old legend, an old fairy tale, right?
Shall I read this quote?
Sure.
All the conspiracies are leading up to one event. There is an ancient angel that has been working on a system that would allow him to actually control the world to such a degree that he could force them to worship him as God. And unfortunately, for the first time in history, the technology is capable of doing that. I believe that the implantable microchip could actually play a role in this. And he's the general in this. That is why you find Satanism behind every door you kick down in the investigation of the New World Order. Lucifer, they have always been preparing you for him. Their agenda has never changed, but we have been so brainwashed to hate Christianity that the Bible is the last place we would look for truth. He then goes on to say, quote, he is entirely just, talking about Jesus, he is entirely just and sincere and humble in the Bible, yet for some unknown reason what he said is absolutely true. We will be hated for his namesake.
So this to me is the exposition of someone who is deeply confused. And I get confused listening to him. But let me see if I can draw a paraphrase of what he says, again, at the risk of making a straw man. He appears to be saying that the deceit of the round earth, right, is a Luciferic ploy. And it has Luciferian Satanists behind it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. And yet, and as part of that ploy, as part of that con, that mindfuck, they are trying to direct us away from the truth that has always been there for us in the Bible. Hence, let's go back and look at biblical fundamentalism. Let's revive the Christian topography of the Middle Ages, and then we'll be on solid ground.
Yep.
Okay? Well, that's his argument. I totally disagree with that argument.
But his argument is all over the place. I mean, I've been looking at this man's work for since 2016, on and off, because I can only take it in small doses. It makes me want to puke. I looked at his latest upload on YouTube, yesterday or the day before, and it's a little video of him doing really extreme yoga poses.
On one foot.
Really extreme yoga poses, and it's about 5 minutes long, and he's saying trust your intuition, trust what you see, we've been lied to, da 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 da. And then at the very end he says he blames the Freemasons for lying to us all about the shape of the earth being round, and that the Freemason society is the oldest society known to man.
Right, which to my mind, based on the evidence I've seen, is certainly not true.
No, Freemasonry is a Jewish society.
Yeah, it's a Jew wannabe game for...
It's the illegitimate daughter of the synagogue.
Of the synagogue, yes. So, what I gather from that is that here is an individual, a voice in the movement, who has fingered the Masons. Others have fingered the Jesuits. I tend to think that if there is a nefarious group behind this, it may well be the Jesuits who are pushing the Flat Earth movement. I tend to think that.
And who are the Jesuits?
And who are the Jesuits, right. Who are the Jesuits? The Jesuits.
The Jews, they're Jews.
Yeah. They're crypto-Jews. Loyola was a crypto-Jew. And Catholicism and Christianity, let us repeat for the nth time, are simply a Jewish Semitic mind implant. Christianity is a Jewish...
It's a desert religion.
It's a desert religion. It doesn't belong in the minds of people of the Western world. So, point I want to make about the purpose of this PSYOP, and this goes back to a discussion we had at the beginning. I said to you a couple of years ago now, isn't it interesting, and isn't it rather curious, that the assault of the flat earth paradigm is coming out to the world at the same time that the Sophianic cosmology of Gnosis is coming out to the world. So although I started writing about the cosmology of the Aeons of Fire, the creation of the earth in the sacred narrative of the mysteries, etc., etc., in 2002 on Metahistory, and then I brought it out in 2006 on my book, well over 12 years ago, it's taken time to build. Now it's got some tread. During the GNE, it got a lot of tread. Since 2014, it's getting even more tread. So I pointed out to you, at the risk of seeming arrogant and saying it's targeted at me, I wonder if in certain respects it might not be targeted at me, as I am the primary proponent of the Sophianic cosmology. So I just leave that out, as I throw that out as something to consider. Because it's certainly, if you're going to buy into Flat Earth and reinstall the Creator God Old Testament model of the world, you are not going to be able to accept or feel or recognize the power of the Sophianic vision of the cosmos. It's those two have been at war for centuries. So that's just a suggestion.
I think it might be appropriate for you to explain, before everyone's head blows off, what you mean by Nazi Satanist.
Yes, that's right. Well, we haven't come out formally and said that we're Nazi Satanists, have we? But I'm sure we're being accused of that in the minds of many people, and that accusation will grow rich and juicy.
John Lash, the Nazi Satanist.
Yes, with that horrible woman, that Bussy the sniper. Yeah, okay, this is the footnote. First of all, let's deconstruct that accusation. Am I a Satanist? Yes, I am a Satanist in this sense. The word Satan is not really an entity, but initially it just means adversary. And so to be a Satanist means to take an adversarial viewpoint. Now, in the Romantic movement, with which I identify deeply, the image of the satanic hero was very popular. So you found that in Goethe, you find it particularly in Byron, Lord Byron, the British poet. What was the satanic hero of the Romantics? I identify with that image. What was it? It was simply someone that said, no, I don't believe you, I don't go along with convention, I don't believe what religion tells us. I take an adversarial view toward just about everything that I've been taught.
So flat earthers are actually Satanists?
They are, in a way, Satanists in the respect that they're taking an adversarial view against the spherical model of the earth. It's just a term, it's not a designation.
It's not a deity,
it's not a person, and it doesn't necessarily, it's about a position or style. That's all. And so, in that sense, I plead guilty to being a Satanist. As far as being a Nazi is concerned, well, I'm obviously not a Nazi, because the Nazi refers to the National Socialist Workers' Party that was formed in Germany in the 1920s. As far as I know, that political party doesn't exist anymore. I don't belong to any political party, and so I'm not a Nazi in that sense. But I could be, on a stretch, considered a Nazi sympathizer, in that I recognize the heroic beauty and power of the German people and of the unique role that the German people play in the fate of humanity, and that historically speaking, I see that role having been enacted through the Third Reich and the Nazi movement led by Adolf Hitler.
Adolf Hitler being the Kalki avatar.
Adolf Hitler being, by some accounts, the Kalki avatar, which is a great subject that we might talk about with great pleasure one of these days. So leaving that aside, let's bring this second talk around to its conclusion. And I would like to mention, in doing so, a particular hypocrisy that I find in the flat earth argument, and I'd like to say it not as criticism or not to put them down or dismiss them, discount them, but as an invitation for them to clean up their act so that really we can really get something out of this debate together, you know? The problem that I see with the flat earth movement, the problem that they struggle with is that they continually confuse error and deceit. And these are not the same things. Deceit is an intentional program implemented by someone for a particular purpose. Now, I don't doubt in the least that NASA is deceitful. I'm sure NASA is deceitful. It's deceitful about the moon landings. It's deceitful about many things. But NASA is an institution. And the deceit coming from NASA must not be confused with truth or error in science. Truth or error in science is a completely different subject. But they have confused these two things over and over again, which makes a rational and productive argument almost impossible.
But let's make one thing clear. You are not worshipping at the altar of science either.
I am not.
Because you know, as do many people, that science, in the main part, is deceitful.
Absolutely. And it's not just an error. When I look at relativity theory, when I look at quantum physics, when I look at string theory, when I look at things that are said about CERN, this is all deliberate deceit. This is deliberate deceit. So there are errors in science. What is the difference between an error and a deceit? Well, you can detect the error, and then you can correct the error, and you're better off than you were before because you've learned something. But you can't correct a deceit. All you can do is expose the deceit, and if possible, and in many cases it's not possible, unfortunately, is to get to the people who are propagating that deceit. So this confusion of deceit and error is very unfortunate in the debate. So I'd like to close with putting out this challenge. I put out a challenge at the end of the previous talk, which I'd like to repeat so that it's clear. Don't strawman me on this. I didn't say that all flat earthers have to denounce and renounce all of their views. No, I said that if I'm going to enter into debate with them, I require that they denounce and renounce the view that flat earth was the dominant view in ancient cultures, that it was the dominant view held by the common people as well as by the creators of high cultures such as Chinese, Egyptian, Babylonian astronomy. Chinese, Egyptian, and Babylonian astronomers and Mayan and Aztec astronomers did not hold a view of flat earth. So the historical evidence does not support that. So that's what I asked. I'm going to make a second polite request. Flat earthers come at you and they insist, like Eric Dubé, look at what you perceive. Trust what you perceive, right? Does the earth look flat? Well, first of all, the earth is not flat. The overall global shape of the earth may be a disk, but the surface of the earth is anything but flat. You have the Himalayas, which are what, 26,000 feet high?
And below the surface that you can't see.
And there's below the surface and there's the depths of the ocean. Yeah. Don't call that flat. So the earthly environment is not flat. The earthly environment is massively contoured, but presumably the entire earthly environment is set as if in a petri dish in a large bounded disk. Okay, that's the flat earth model. I think it would be more accurate if they called it the disk earth, because it's obviously conceived as a disk. Here's my closing point, which is an invitation, a friendly invitation. If you, flat earthers, are going to insist that we only go on what we perceive and trust what we perceive, then are you willing to admit that there are two imperceptible factors in your model? The first imperceptible factor is the boundary of the disk. I cannot perceive the boundary of the disk. You tell me as a flat earther to trust my perception that the earth is flat. I've gone around the earth, by the way. I've circumnavigated the earth when I was 19 years old.
Mostly on foot. Mostly on foot,
right? And so at all the points where I was on the earth, in Maine, in Europe, in the Middle East, in Lebanon, at Singapore, in Japan, in India, in San Francisco, I went around the earth. It all appeared to be flat. Trust that it's flat. Fine. But I cannot trust that there is an edge to the disk because I haven't perceived that edge. So they're asking you to accept something that is imperceptible, which is in contradiction to their main premise, right? The second thing that flat earthers ask you to believe or accept that is imperceptible is the bottom of the disk. I ask any flat earther who relies only on what you can see, have you seen the bottom of the disk? Is it flat also? Is it perfectly flat? Is it like semicircular, like half an egg? Is it cone-shaped? What is the shape of the bottom of the earth disk? Well, that is something that cannot be perceived. So I would ask flat earthers to admit going in, I don't discount them on the basis of these 2 points, but they would at least admit that they assume 2 things which are not verifiable by direct sense perception. That's all I ask. And then we can have an argument, we can have a debate, and we can compare evidence.
I would like to know, from flat earthers, when one looks at the horizon, how does someone calculate the distance of the particular horizon they're looking at? Because it depends on the observer and what horizon you're looking at. There's no, because there is not one horizon.
Certainly not, because the surface of the Earth habitat, the terrestrial habitat, is not flat. It's massively contoured. So what does the horizon look like from standing on the top of Everest, from standing at the shore of the Dead Sea, which is below sea level, from being in the Sahara, from being in the middle of the Pacific Ocean? These are all different horizons. So how do flat earthers arrive at a norm for the distance to the horizon of any observer. I would like to know that. And unfortunately, if I were to go on the internet now and start looking at flat earth videos to try to find an answer to that,
spend the rest of your life.
I would be ill after 2 hours, and I could listen for 20 hours and not find and not hear the answer. And this is really disappointing. So I just want to say in conclusion that I don't throw out the flat earth paradigm. In fact, I give you my version of it in the next talk. And give you my version. You know, I'll conclude it with this riddle. What is the true shape of the earth? Well, it's a sphere that can appear as flat, and it's a flat disk that can appear as a sphere. It's both. What if it's both? Where does that put us?